Welcome to the Business of Meetings podcast. I'm Eric Rosenberg, and today I am very happy to be speaking with Lara McCulloch. Lara has so much experience in marketing. She's been consulting with the largest companies in the world like Unilever, Johnson & Johnson, and the like. She's helping small business companies as a fractional CMO, and we're going to hear very interesting points she's making about the strategy, whether it's investing with more dollars in advertising or going into a lower price, and looking at being disruptive, which is an approach very interesting for small business. And she will also share with us a quote from Jeff Bezos about how to look at the future, which I let you discover is very interesting and resonates a lot with you. Have a great listening. Hello and welcome to the Business of Meetings podcast. I'm Eric Rosenberg, and today I am delighted to be speaking with Lara McCulloch. Did I pronounce it well, Lara?
You did so good. That was amazing.
I tried. Lara, you're really somebody that I was looking to speak with for many, many months, because I keep hearing your name. I keep hearing about the community you create. You have this positioning of a fractional CMO, but you've been advising companies like Unilever, if I remember well, Johnson & Johnson, did I read that well? Kraft, Shell. I mean, all big companies around the globe. You're a thinker, you're a doer, you have groups, and we'll talk about it later. So thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
And you are the one, if I'm not mistaken, who came up with the first hashtag eventprof.
Yeah. It sounds silly now.
Why? No, I think it's brilliant. When did that happen, and how did that happen?
Yeah. It's funny. I remember I was keynoting an event, and I came on the stage and they introduced me from the Word of God as the founder of EventProfs. The hashtag EventProfs. And I kind of cringed a little bit because, and a hashtag now is as easy as creating a pound symbol and you've got a hashtag. There's really nothing to it. Back in 2007, you have to remember what the world was like back then. We basically, there was a group of us on Twitter who were in the events industry. And, I would say that the thing that unified us was we were all kind of on the bleeding edge of wanting to incorporate technology into our businesses. And Twitter was so new. Twitter, I think, had been around for less than a year at that point, or maybe a year. People didn't really understand it. They didn't understand social media. I remember walking a trade show floor and saying, I'd like to interview you for my blog, and people laughing me off the floor, like blogs were something that kids did. And Twitter wasn't that far off. It was just not very well understood. But I saw there was a big opportunity. There was people on Twitter, but there was no way of organizing conversation until I learned about this thing called the hashtag. And I thought, if we could create a hashtag for our community, then we could organize conversations on Twitter, and we could all be talking to each other all at the same time using this tool that, is brand new to us. And so that's how EventProfs was formed back in 2007. And it was a lot more than just creating a hashtag and starting the conversation. We had to also train people how to use the tool, what a hashtag was. We were polling the community to find out what are the hot topics you need to be talking about. We would bring in moderators, and that really created a very thriving community of people who at that time, like I said, were on the bleeding edge of being very hungry for what this social media thing was and how we could start to incorporate it into events.
And what is your Twitter handle then?
So the Twitter handle for EventProfs is EventProfs. The Twitter handle for me is Lara McCulloch, which is impossible to spell. So just go follow EventProfs. Really funny story. I don't even know if I should share this. I started EventProfs so long ago, and I'm from Canada, so I used a Canada.com email address. They don't even exist anymore. And unfortunately, I have no access. I can't post on EventProfs. I can't do anything. I'm in the process right now of trying to get it back. But yeah.
but at least you using your name was kind of clever. I know a friend of mine who used Yoda 18 as his Twitter handle
Yeah.
because he had no clue what it was, and
Right.
just give it a try. Actually, that would be me.
Oh, no way. What's the association with Yoda?
Well, Yoda is, I love Yoda. I love the philosophy of Yoda from Star Wars. I like the do or do not, there is no try. I just love it. And so I thought, yeah, it's funny. I know what Twitter is. But after some years, when you realize that actually it's a real thing that people are exchanging and following you. And I thought, you know what? I'll keep it. So, but I don't know if it's a good thing today, but anyway, we can talk about it another time. So you
can
have
change it anytime.
Oh, see, but I'm not sure I want to. So
yeah, I kind of like Yoda 18. It's perfect. Yep.
It's like I have this suitcase on R2D2, and people look at it at the airport, and I look at them and say, no, you might think it's from my children. No, it's mine. It's mine.
I love it. My son would love you.
So you have all this experience working with large corporation, and then you decide actually that you want to start your own company, and you come with this concept of fractional CMO. So can you speak a little bit about that? As you know, this podcast is primarily for business owners. Yeah. So how do you make the shift, and how does that come about?
Ooh, good question. How did I make the shift to owning my own business? That's a really long story. You probably don't want to hear it. But the net
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
The net was that I was working in the agency world. And if anybody's familiar with that world, it's a very dog-eat-dog world. There wasn't a lot of women in senior level positions. There was certainly a lot of women in admin or client services, but not a lot of women at the top of the agency world when I was in it. And I had started in the agency world when I was about 17 years old. So I was on my own and trying to keep a roof over my head and food on my plate. And so I started off emptying garbages and answering phones, and had an amazing mentor who was a woman, the only woman I knew, in a senior position. And she told me, if you want to do well in this industry, you have to work harder and later and longer than anybody else because you're a woman. And so that's what I did for probably about 12 or 13 years. And it worked. I clambered my way up the corporate ladder and was poised to take over my boss's position. And I realized I was making ridiculous money for somebody in their 20s. And I was had the title and was very successful, but I was not happy, and I couldn't enjoy the money that I was making because I didn't have time to go out with friends. And so I really, I did what everybody thought I was crazy to do, which was to say goodbye to that, impending position that I had worked my entire, all of my late teens and 20s to achieve. And so when I decided to start my business, I had a choice. I could have done what most people do when they leave the agency world, which is to start up their own smaller agency. But I realized at that time it would have just perpetuated the issue that I was feeling before working for somebody else, except I'd be doing it for myself. And so this is where the story gets a little bit longer, but I really asked myself, how did I want to feel on a daily basis, which is not something we talk about in business very much.
Exactly.
But it's so important, because if you talk to anybody and say, how's work, they're talking about their feelings. I'm tired of not being appreciated. I don't feel fulfilled. Those are all feelings. So I really asked myself how I wanted to feel, and I created what I call a mood board, which is something you traditionally use in the agency world. And that mood board became a litmus test for what I wanted to create in that next phase in my life. And so I decided to be a consultant, or what I call a fractional CMO. I can come in and be a CMO for your company, but I tend to work with companies that are between $2 and $10 million for that side of the business where I'm doing consulting. And they can't afford to bring in a CMO. They're just not at that level yet in their business. And so what a fractional CMO is I get to be a CMO for your business, but you get to share me with a number of other companies that I work with. So that's kind of what fractional CMO means. I help my clients develop the strategy of their brand. That's my pedigree. That's the lens that I see marketing through. Is I think most marketing is absolute. Can you swear on this, by the way? I'll say bollocks. How about that? Bollocks. only people in the UK will know what I'm talking about. Most marketing sucks, right? But it's because people haven't created something that people care about, and that's where branding comes into play. Right? If people actually care, if you've created something that is special, then you don't even like marketing is a side effect of having something that isn't that great because you have to pay to get people to pay attention. And so what I want to do is I want to work with brands that are doing that right now, but want to pivot to really creating something special that people are interested in and want to pay attention to. And that's where branding comes into play.
Wow, that's really impressive. First of all, I don't know how many people in their 20s will think about what you thought about that when you were working the agency and about the mood board. And second, I'm not sure that a lot of people actually took the time to do that for the decision. But before we continue on marketing, you said something that really struck my mind. And as a husband and a father of 3 daughters, you say that you've been mentored by women. And do you see things changing now? Because the meetings and event industry is really 80% of women. Yeah. And my experience in the past has been that women are not necessarily helping other women. And it's not helping to break this glass ceiling. And that I thought was the last 10 years. It seems to me that now it's changing. Do you share that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's been a fundamental shift. And you see this amongst any I hate the term minority because most minorities aren't actually minorities, but against any group of people.
50%, they don't represent 50% of the world population.
Right. But anybody who's disenfranchised, the moment you have one singular person who's been able to break a barrier and get into some sort of position, it becomes very, very difficult for them to pave a way for others like them. The system isn't set up for that. And so I think there has to be the only way to give somebody else power is to give up some power yourself. That is, it's kind of, power to me is transferable. There has to be a point in time in which you say, I am going to do something that could potentially diminish myself in the eyes of other people in order to help somebody else. And that's a very difficult decision for a lot of people to make. But absolutely, I think we've gone through a process where there was thinking that was a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? Coming from a place of scarcity. And now we have a lot of thinking that's coming from a place of abundance, that if we band together as women, we can create some really amazing movements. And so we've been seeing a lot of this and a lot of power within women's groups right now.
Finally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. What you're describing about not diminishing, but giving a little bit more of your power to others, the way I look at it is more like servant leadership. It's helping others, knowing that at the end of the day, because you help others, basically you're doing the right thing and it's going to benefit you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a nice way of putting it. Yes.
So when going back to the marketing part, and I like when, I'm preparing a podcast interview and I look at what people are doing and what they're saying. And there's something that obviously is made to ask you the question, but I'm really curious. You say that one of your goals in the next 12 months is to move 1,000 business from the land of ambiguity to disruptive cure. So
Yes.
all my friends who know me will know that even when I pronounce a word in English, sometimes it sounds like something else. But even there, I'm reading the moving from land of ambiguity to disruptive cure. What is
Yeah.
it?
All right. So this is a fundamental belief that I have. I think that one of the most important decisions that businesses need to make, and this is a very important strategic decision, is that they need to choose one of three strategies when it comes to their business. And I kind of look at this like a pyramid, right? And on the one side of the pyramid going up, you have the opportunity to be a noise leader, which means that you spend more money than anybody else in your market on advertising. And this is a great strategy that a lot of bigger businesses use to drown out their smaller competitors. It works quite well. Challenge is it's very hard for small businesses to play in there. And over time, it can get more and more expensive. So the second strategic option you have is to be the low price leader, which means that your pricing is lower than anybody else in your market. Systematically. So this, or operationally, I should say. So this is not about, getting a project and underbidding it, and the next one you're kind of price par, and the next one you elevate your pricing. You have to make your pricing absolutely across the board the lowest in your industry. We refer to that as the race to the bottom because, of course, in times like right now where we're in a down economy, a lot of people want to be playing here because there's a lot of people with tightened purse strings. But a lot of people either can't or don't want to play in either one of those two strategies. So in my opinion, the only other strategy that a business has is to have a disruptive cure, which means that you have a solution or a cure to an untapped problem in your marketplace that causes disruption. And you're doing that for a very narrowly defined audience, which I call a micro niche. So that's the concept of the three different strategies. The problem is that the vast majority of businesses don't pick any one of those three strategies because they don't put the thought into it. They just create a business. This is always what I wanted to do. I'm really good at it. They start a business. They tend to look at the leader in that business. They say, ooh, I really like that. I like the way they said that. I like what they're doing. And so they become a version of the competition. And usually it's not as good of a version because haven't been around long enough. They don't have the systems, the infrastructure, the partnerships, all that kind of stuff. And so typically their pricing tends to be a little bit lower and they grow over time because maybe they get new customers. But now they're a bigger version of their competitors. And they differentiate on degrees. So Bain Research actually did a study on this, and they found that about 80% of leaders believe that their brands are highly differentiated in the market, which is amazing. Problem was that only 8% of their customers actually agree, right?
Yeah.
So fundamentally, and every single client I ever work with, when I say, what makes you different? We have more offices around the world. We have more awards than anybody else. We have better customer service. That's a big one. And they use terms like that, more and better. And so those are ways that we anchor ourselves to our competition. Those words say that we are a version of somebody else. Maybe in our opinion, it's a better version, but most likely for our customers, it's a replica of somebody else. There's no distinguishable difference. And so they'll pay the lowest possible price. And so those are the companies that fall into what I call the land of ambiguity. And land of ambiguity is a very scary place to be. In good times, the land of ambiguity is okay. Those businesses survive just fine. They do okay.
Yeah.
In these times, it's a really scary place to be in the land of ambiguity. So my goal is to move 10,000 businesses from the land of ambiguity to having a disruptive cure.
That's awesome. And to your point, I'm even surprised that companies will still thrive in a normal time if they speak the language you mentioned, because quite frankly, why do I care that you have so many awards? And why do I care that you have so many offices?
Yeah.
What does it do for me? What does it do for my company? Nothing.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So you transfer this knowledge to smaller company. And when you go, and how's the process you are following to understand their strategy, their competition, so that they can position themselves in a disruptive manner?
Yeah, so that would probably be a conversation, a really, really in-depth conversation. There's, the way that I look at it, there's three fundamentals. There's three things that no matter what disruptive company you're looking at, they share these three things. And by the way, I should mention, disruption is a term that's often misunderstood. So a lot of times people think, in order to be disruptive, I have to have $1 million R&D budget, or I need to invest heavily in technology.
Yeah.
Disruption, and I'm gonna talk about this in one of the three things, but disruption can come on the end by simply how you position yourself and how you communicate yourself as a business. So it can cost $0 to be disruptive. So the three fundamentals of creating a disruptive cure is, number one, the micro niche. So that is the narrowest possible audience who share a common set of goals and pains and beliefs, values, obstacles. And when I say the narrowest possible audience, I mean that. This is one of the fundamental issues with a lot of small businesses is this fear, this scarcity fear. Like, if I'm too specific, I'm going to miss out on all of these opportunities over here. By playing in all these different fields, all you're doing is broadening dramatically your competition. So the goal with really great branding is to be the only one, not one of many.
That's why they say that the riches are in the niches.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So micro niche is the first point.
The micro niche is the first point. The second point is triggers. So once we understand who it is that we're looking to connect with, the important thing is now to understand what actually motivates them to buy. So usually what motivates us to buy, and this is based on a lot of research, is pains over hopes and dreams. So we have both. They're kind of like two different ends of a circle, right? We have hopes and dreams, and then we have pains. Pains tend to motivate us much more quickly than a hope and a dream will. So understanding pains is really important. What are those triggers that will motivate somebody to want to choose to work with you? And I can walk you through an example of this a little bit later if we want to do that. But so that's the second thing. And then the third thing is anti-narratives.
Anti-narrative.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So and by narrative, I mean stories, right? So in every single industry, in every segment of every industry, there are stories that exist. And some of these stories are perpetuated by your competition, and others are just the way that they are. And we don't even notice stories. So these are constructs. If you think about constructs that exist in society, they would be things like, well, if you're going to be successful, you go to university. And when you graduate from university, you have a very good job. You get married, you then have a child. And then, so on, and then you have a house with a white picket fence. So those are all constructs that exist in our society. We have similar constructs in industries as well. So if you hire an audio-visual company, that company, construct might be that you're hiring a company that's great at technology. Or the construct might be an AV company is an AV company is an AV company because they all basically rent out equipment. So there's constructs or stories that exist and perceptions that people have. If you look at any great brand, they have absolutely set fire to old narratives. Apple did that with PC.
Yeah.
Right.
And the 1984 story.
Yes. Yeah. It was, they created the story. They reframed the story as PC being very Orwellian, and suddenly they were, they thought differently. They were the ones who kicked us out of the drone mentality. And every single great brand out there has an anti-narrative, and you do not need to have $1 million ad budget to create one. I have examples of tons of small businesses who have just articulated the way that they do things differently. And it's usually founded on beliefs.
It's usually, sorry?
It's usually founded on a core set of beliefs.
Because when you're talking about that, I was thinking of the guy who launched Dollar Shave Club.
Yes.
And the video that he put together was a totally different narrative. Quite frankly, in the market, you would have said it's impossible to take any position there. I think the video cost $4,500, and then he sold it for $1 billion to Unilever a few years later.
Right.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah. And that's the thing. If you cannot, when you go back to the domination mountain that I talked about, that pyramid that I talked about earlier, you can't go head to head with the big guy who's spending more money on advertising than anybody else. Like, they couldn't go head to head with Gillette or Unilever. Is Gillette owned by Unilever? I can't remember. But whoever.
No, I think Gillette is P&G. Yeah.
P&G. Okay. Well, whoever the market leader is, like, you can't go head to head. So they could have been the lowest price, which is kind of what they did. They married that strategy, but they led with a disruptive cure, right? They had a pain, which is, razors are expensive. We have to use them all the time. Why go out to the store and go and buy that when you can have a subscription where you can get these, and it's really cost effective.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love your concept. So the pyramid with, or you spend more dollar on advertising, or you lower the price, or you go disruptive. And then in the disruptive, you have the micro niche, you have the triggers, and the anti-narrative.
Yes.
And I know my wife would not believe that, but sometimes I'm a very good listener. And I know you said that you were coming back with another story about triggers. So I'd like to hear about it.
Yeah, well, I was gonna tell you like an example of how this all went down for one of my clients. And I can talk about, one that's relevant today in a time when we have to pivot our businesses, or, in a time that's relevant whenever. So I'll talk about the latter. But I work with an audiovisual company out in the US. And basically when we first started working together, they communicated what they did differently as, we service our clients better than anybody else. Mm-hmm. And that they might well have been better at servicing their clients than anybody else. The problem with hanging your hat on something like service is it is an earned trait. So the only way that you can use the term amazing customer service is somebody else to say that about you. Right. And the only way I can say that about you is if I hand you money and choose to do business with you. But I can't do that in the pre-sale process. So in the pre-sale process, you tell me you're great at customer service. So does everybody else who's your competitor. And I, as a prospective customer, have no way of knowing who really is. So it becomes white noise. So they were in the land of ambiguity. And one of the things that we started out with was, okay, well, who's the micro niche? And we went through there's a lot of questions you have to ask to kind of uncover this. But what we uncovered was they loved working with associations, specifically association managers, who hold at least one major event with greater than 500 people. And so we can drill that down even more, but I won't bore you with the details, but we had their micro niche. So the next step was to understand what were the triggers. And it's easy to take a look at obvious triggers, right? So we could say, well, those people are really interested. They've got one chance to get it right. They've got an event. They can't, no do-overs. So they have to have an AV company that's amazing, has great products, great customer service. And there we are back in the land of ambiguity, if that's all we see as the triggers. But we dug way deeper. And again, there's a certain level of questions you go through. We dug way deeper. And what came out of it was, for association managers, or the ones that we were talking about, these association managers typically are under immense pressure because they are responsible for making sure members stay members and that we're attracting new members. Yeah. And so, they have to create tremendous value. And this big event that happens once a year is one of the major ways of creating value. And so they spend 362 days of the year planning this one event, 3 days, actually being at the event. Mm-hmm. And they don't have very good resources, right? So they don't have a team of people usually to help them out. So they're insanely busy. And so when we really dug down, the real pain for them was, how do I create things that are going to be of value and engage my community? So my community, 362 days of the year, feel like they're being looked after when I don't have the resources to be, doing this myself. So as an audiovisual company who's already going to be at that event for 3 days, what we did is we'd redefine them from a technology renter into a content producer. They're at the event for 3 days. They can take every single bit of content that is amazing. Interviews with people who are attending the event, interviews with speakers that they can turn into sound bites, images of people rushing in and so excited to be at the event. They can videograph. Yeah, videograph.
You ask me. I get it. I understand. Film on video, yeah.
They can take videos basically of everything that's happening. And so what we did was we, again, reframed them to be content producers. And now they create 365 days of content that is an easy button for the association manager to press. They don't have to worry about anything. 365 days of content has been produced for them. And that is a disruptive cure. That there are, where other audiovisual companies are saying, we are amazing at technology and renting that beautiful technology, and boy, we've got the best customer service. There's a narrative that is totally different that's being said by another AV company.
Absolutely. And by the way, when it comes to the client and the association, especially now with the COVID-19 and what's going on, if they have not thought about the engagement throughout the year and are really basing themselves and their revenue on one event per year.
Yeah.
If they're, if this is happening now, I really feel for them. I think that we're going to see a lot of change in the market as well when it comes to associations.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Yes.
So when you're looking at an independent business owners, or you're looking at an event planner, I joined the meetings industry by pure coincidence. I didn't even know that exists. Yeah. And people in my generation, we just fell into it. We didn't have the master in event management and course like that. So there is a very high percentage of chance that I love logistics. I thrive on stress. Wonderful. But I never had the basic when it comes to business management, or in our particular case today, in terms of marketing. Right. So what can I do? What should I read? How can I educate myself a little bit when it comes to marketing and positioning, so that I understand the basics before working with somebody like you, who's a fractional CMO?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Most of the clients that I work with don't really have a very firm understanding of marketing. And that's really the job of somebody like me, is to work with those clients to help guide them and create a good path. But if I was to pick a book, I would say the very best book that you can read to understand marketing and branding, which often go hand in hand. Marketing is just a way to promote your brand. Is Positioning by Al Ries and Jack
Trout.
Yeah.
Yes. Positioning, the battle for your mind.
Absolutely. I'm glad you know this book. It's an old book. I think it was written in the 70s. Yeah. It's quite old. And so the references that they use will be outdated. But it is kind of like the Bible for people in my industry. It will tell you all the fundamental things you need to really understand to build something important.
I love it. And just for the record, we didn't prepare that. I didn't ask you the question.
No, you didn't.
And that's exactly the book I'm recommending as well. Yeah. I just love the concept when they speak about Avis and Urs, or when they speak about Paradise Island. And my favorite, and I get it, and I ask some people sometimes like that, I said, do you remember the first time you did this? Or do you remember the first person who walked on the moon, or the first person who crossed the Atlantic Ocean on a plane? That's the example they're giving.
Yes.
Do you remember your first significant other?
Yeah.
Then they go, and the second one, and the second one. It goes, I don't.
Yeah.
And just love the book. Absolutely. So I'm reading that book. I know about, once again, for those who are listening, Positioning, the Battle for Your Mind from Al Ries and Jack Trout. I have the basics understanding. Yeah. How do I work with you being a small business owner?
Yeah. So this is one of the things that really, I see this time of COVID-19 as an amazing opportunity. I see it as the great reset. It's been referred to as the great pause. I think that's one stage in the grief
Mm-hmm.
process, is to pause. But there's a lot of action that needs to take place right now. We need to really understand our consumers and what's important to them and what they need. And so that's what I had to do in my business, and my business model up until COVID-19 was predominantly being a fractional CMO for businesses that could afford to bring me in. And not, I would speak at events and I would turn away 98% of the business that would come my way because they couldn't afford my services.
Mm-hmm.
Now with COVID-19, the pause gave me an opportunity to do the thing that I've always wanted to do not always, but for the last number of years have really wanted to do, which is to be able to bring what I do to businesses who don't have very big budgets to hire somebody, or who can't afford me one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have launched a group coaching program. And the group coaching program, because of these times right now, because we don't know what a week's going to look like, let alone a month or a year from now, I had no interest in building a program and giving you a self-study program on how to build a disruptive cure. It just wouldn't be relevant,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So instead, with a group coaching program, it allows people to jump on every single, week with me to answer their questions that are most important to their business right now and that are timely and relevant to what's happening in the world right now. So that's the big thing that I'm working on right now to help smaller businesses.
Fabulous. And we'll talk at the end. I think you also have a gift for those who are listening today.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
Now, you rightly mentioned COVID-19 and what we have to do, the great reset or the pause. We had a discussion recently about what to do immediately and how to prepare ourselves for the future. What type of leaders you think are going to emerge from COVID-19 in the future? What type of personalities and what is needed to thrive afterwards?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I think fundamentally, the way that I've defined it is you have the reactors, the retractors, and the resolvers, right? There's 3 different types of people right now.
Say that again, please.
The reactors,
Yes.
the retractors,
Yes.
and the resolvers.
Okay.
So reacting is fundamentally an innate reaction when something happens, right? Something happens, a book falls on the floor, we react to it, we jump. Mm-hmm. So it's very familiar to us to react to something. And there's a lot of people right now who are cutting every expense, who are, focusing on the now. What do I need to do right now? I need money right now. And based on research, so Harvard Business Review actually did research with 4,700 public companies, and they took a look at how those companies fared over 3 recessions. And what they found was the reactors fared the worst, right? So if you look at, growth over time, they kind of fell. If they're
still around.
Well. What's that?
If they are still around.
If they're still around. Well, exactly. Yeah. Then you have the retractors, and those are people who right now are hiding. They're waiting for things to go back to normal. They don't want to say or do anything, and they're clinging for dear life to this idea that things are going to go back to the way that they were.
Wow. Good luck.
Yes. If there's anybody who's listening right now and saying that, thinking that's me, we now are in a totally different world, and that the world is never going to go back to the way that it was. Exactly. And the biggest disservice that you can do is, and I have different philosophies on this. There's, I believe that we're very enrobed in ego, which is a harsh sounding word, but it's what makes us hold on to the things that we once knew, right? Like there was ways that we once operated. There's things that we knew. And it's very hard for us to think about ourselves as beginners again, which is what COVID-19 is forcing a lot of us to do. It's, it doesn't matter how seasoned of a business owner you were or how successful your business was. If your business isn't essential, there's rethinking that needs to go on right now. Yeah. And so retracting is not really an option. And we tend to see those, the retractors kind of go through these peaks and valleys over time. And they generally, in something like this, come out the same or slightly worse off. And then you have the resolvers. And the resolvers are people who absolutely are focused on building operational efficiencies right now. but they are also really focused on the future because they recognize that this, in the grand scheme of the lifespan of your business, will be a blip. It'll be a very important blip, and I'm not downplaying obviously the health issues, but I'm just talking about from a business standpoint. You know, they recognize that this is a point in time and there will be time afterwards that we need to think about. And those businesses tend to have an upwards trajectory. They fare the best. So coming out of this, I think we're going to see a lot of those resolvers doing really well. We're going to see the retractors in the same or slightly worse off place, and we're going to see a heck of a lot less reactors.
Very interesting. And to your point, I think two major points I would add listening to you. The first one is, if for whatever reason you end up now in a situation where you had to furlough or lay off a lot of people, that has nothing to do with your leadership or management capabilities.
Yes.
It's just the way it is.
Yes.
And the second one really is, if you are, I would say, under 33 years old and you're listening now, it's probably your first business crisis. And yes, we'll get through this. Yeah, we'll always go through this. And obviously, it's not the same as in the past, but the fundamental to your point, in the grand scheme of things, there's a big hurdle, and it's not the end. Obviously, we're not talking about health; we're talking about business, which is very important.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I would look at, you know, sweeping layoffs with just the present in mind would be reactionary. Strategic layoffs to build efficiencies in the business that need to take place in order to give you the runway is a strategic decision that's based on the longevity of your business. So those are two very different things. And I'm glad you made the distinction there, because that's an important one. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to close this conversation with looking further down the road. How do you see the industry evolving? What do you think is going to happen to the face-to-face meetings, and how does the meetings and event industry is going to thrive?
So this is actually something I teach. I teach quite a bit with my clients. Is I think fundamentally as humans we have this innate curiosity about what's going to change, and it is important for us to understand what the start of certain waves are, because those will drive new pains and new opportunities for business. But the more things won't change than will. And I remember Jeff Bezos saying this really great quote. He was saying that one of the most common things he's asked is, you know, what's going to change over the next 10 years? And he said, I'm more interested in what's not going to change, because you can build a business strategy around things that remain constant. Wow. Nice. And it was a really great way of looking at it. You know, taking a look at this industry, I think things will fundamentally change. I think the way that we behave, the way that we operate, and the habits that we have, as much as we want to change, we will go back to a very similar way of life that we once had. That said, I think there are businesses now awakening to the fact that, hey, we can do a lot of this stuff online. There are events that are taking place where they say, hey, we can save a lot of money, create an amazing experience for our guests. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to take place in person, or we can augment it with an in-person that's a little bit different than the way that we were operating before. So I think it's opened our eyes up to what is possible. Mm-hmm. So do I see face-to-face events still being important? Absolutely. Fundamentally, we need to connect as human beings. And this has only served to reinforce that for us. Like, we crave now that human connection that we can't have. Yeah. We'll be going through a transitional period of fear where people will be afraid to do it in certain, groups. Mm-hmm. There will be a fear that will take a little bit of time to get over, but I don't anticipate it'll take a long time. And do I see a resurgence or a growth of online events or hybrid events, yeah, I do. I absolutely do.
I don't disagree with that. About the growth of hybrid events, and definitely about the craving of going back face to face.
Yeah.
So in 5 years, maybe not 10, but
Yeah.
in 5 years, I'm seeing Lara at a face to face event. Where are you? What are you doing?
Ooh, okay. I am, in 5 years, I've reached my goal of helping 10,000 businesses go from the land of ambiguity to disruptive cure. And we are popping a bottle of champagne to celebrate.
Excellent. I can't wait to do that. And I can't wait to actually meet you face to face for the first time, because we've never met face to face.
I know, it's crazy.
That's the beauty of our industry and beauty of this technology. Lara, thank you so much for taking the time today. I think you gave a lot of great nuggets to everyone. And before we leave, I know you wanted to offer something for those who are listening.
Yeah, I don't know when you're planning on airing this episode. So right now,
we're now 29th of April doing this recording. And I would say it's probably going to be in the next 2.5 months max.
Okay.
Maybe even earlier.
Depending on when it goes out, I'm right now in launch mode for my group coaching program. So I am launching a founding members opportunity to be a part of group coaching, which basically means I'm not advertising it to the general public. Obviously, I'm doing it through your podcast, through my community. What it means to be a founding member is that you get access to weekly group coaching calls with me. You get access to masterclasses once a month with leaders in business resilience. And then you get to access a mastermind, a group mastermind with the entire group. And then as the community grows, you will be put into a smaller mastermind where I'll be doing the group coaching to your smaller mastermind so that everybody can get their questions answered. As founding members, you get lifetime access to the community at a founding members price, which is $199 per month. There are no commitments. You can go month to month, but basically each month you would have 4 group coaching calls with me, which is an incredible deal in comparison to what I charge one-to-one. You can cancel anytime. And if this airs when CART is closed, then you'll have an opportunity to put your name down so that when I do reopen again, you'll be notified. And I would honor for you, Eric, I would honor for your community the same founding members pricing.
It's fabulous. Thank you so much. Lara, thank you again for sharing all your insight. I took a lot of notes, but it's from the pyramid, the 3 points of being disruptive, the reactors, the retractors, the resolvers. And I love what you mentioned about Jeff Bezos to focus on actually what is not going to change and be ready, open for change afterwards. So
I wish I had said it myself.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric. It was a pleasure.
Same here. Bye-bye. I hope you enjoy listening to Lara and all the golden nuggets she shared. I love her approach with reactors, retractors, or resolvers, and also the way she's describing disruptive approach with micro niche, triggers, and anti-narrative. And definitely what she said about Jeff Bezos, look at what is not going to change instead of trying to find out what is going to change. Really love this approach. Thanks again, Lara, for being with us on the podcast today. If you want to connect with me, we have the Facebook group, The Business of Meetings. I hope to see you there, or you can connect with me as well on LinkedIn. Thank you.